Hello, hello, hello. I got so excited. I think I started like exactly at time. I am Rachel Murray. So nice to meet you. Apologies for my skin. It looks terrible in this light, but it's a safe space here at She Geeks Out. So welcome. I first am going to invite my lovely co-host up today, Vienna. Vienna, please turn. Yes. Yeah, she looks significantly better than I do. Just real quick, I want to make sure everyone can hear and see us. I see general chats. Oh, look at all these highs. Hi, 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 hi. So happy to have you here. So I'm Rachel Murray. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of She Geeks Out. For those of you who are new to us, welcome, welcome. Please say hi to all of your friends after all of this. Very quickly, I'm going to give you a rundown. Oh, I'll tell you who we are. If you don't know, we run fabulous events, now all in space, for women in tech and tech adjacent roles. And then we also offer corporate training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I am so excited because the wonderful, talented Vienna DiGiacomo is going to be moderating this panel of incredible humans from Proletariat who are kind enough to sponsor this event and us, and so they are hiring, and you should totally work for them because they are amazing. And Susie, that's right, thank you, in space. So this is the way it's going to work. I'm going to kick things over to Vienna to have somebody from Proletariat speak and just say a word or two, just say hi and how fabulous they are. And then we're going to do a panel with the folks from Proletariat. And then once that's done, I'm going to pop back on and we're going to do some raffle prizes. So stay on. It's a lot of fun. We're going to do what we did last time, which are $25 gift cards to Etsy, because they kind of have the best things right now, and it's digital, and that's where we live. So I think I've covered all of the bases. Vienna, did I cover it all?
The one thing I'd say is let's all embrace our awkward, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes. We live by those words at She Geeks Out. So I feel like more than ever today.
Like even getting on to this thing, right? So yeah, really apologies for that. I don't know what is happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to invite all the proletariats up first. And it's just going to take me a minute because, as Vienna mentioned, awkward. So I'm going to do that. Jennie. Yes. And we got Becca.
Yep, and you can just turn your camera and your mic on as soon as.
Yeah. Jennie got it. Hey, Jennie.
Hi.
And we got Stef. Hey. That's so good. All right. Look at all you pretty faces. Okay. Stef. Tori. Yes. And Cate. I think it's everybody. And I'm not sure who's going to be speaking, just to kick off a few little words about the Proletariat and who Proletariat is. But it can be anyone who's currently a panelist, or I can invite somebody else up, just chat me. Or we can just kick off this panel, and we can do that too, because it's awkward, and that's how we roll. So I'm going to pop off, and I will be back on later.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
So did anybody want to give a quick 1-minute intro to Proletariat?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennie. I'm a producer on the project. Proletariat Inc. is a studio that's based in Boston, although we are also living in outer space right now, like all of you. And we have been around for over 7 years. We've previously worked on mobile titles and PC titles, but our most recent title launched at the beginning of September. It's called Spellbreak. And we just hit our 5 million player mark, which was extremely exciting to us. And it's live on, I'm blanking, I'm nervous, guys, on the Epic Game Store on PC, as well as Xbox, PlayStation 4, and Switch. And hopefully in the future, maybe more platforms to come. But in general, we're just very, very excited to have this game out in the wild now. And for those of you that are gamers and are in the know, it is a battle royale style game. And rather than focus on, guns and that sort of like hyper violent style that you see in a lot of other battle royale games, ours is based around magic. You drop in as a battle mage, and it's you against 41 other people in the match. Sometimes you can squad up with your team, sometimes you go in solo, and you find gauntlets within the match that have that are associated with different magical elements. So let's say you find a fire gauntlet and a toxic gauntlet. If you spray toxic on the ground and then you shoot a fireball at it, it will explode in different ways. So we tried to create this really fun magical world where elements would interact in different ways, and the winner is the last person standing. I think that's it.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll definitely have to check that out. And just welcome everyone. We are joined by Jennie, Becca, Stef, Tori, and Cate, who are some of the awesome folks at Proletariat. I am so excited to be moderating this. We had a lot of great questions come in from the audience, and I'll be asking you those. If people have questions throughout that they want to add in, you can use the Q&A function in the chat, and we hopefully will get to those. We'll try our best to get through all the questions today, so feel free to drop those in there. So I guess we could start. Just tell me about your role. What do you do? How did you get started? I guess we can start with Becca, and then if you want to hand that off to the next person, that'd be great.
Sure. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I'm a senior animator at Proletariat. So my job is to make all of the characters move around. My job is to make anything from combat-related animation to emotes that you can play in-game, to world interaction actions where you're like picking things up in the world, stuff like that. But yeah, that's what I do in my day-to-day. Cate, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you so much. So my name is Cate Olsen. I'm the digital marketing manager at Proletariat. Wear a lot of hats. I have a background in film. That's actually how I got started. And I worked making films for sci-fi and a couple for Lifetime, actually. It wasn't really for me. I was looking for a way that I can apply my degree. And I had always been a long-time gamer, a huge hobby of mine, big passion. And it never really occurred to me that there were jobs within the industry that weren't mathematical or required to have a background in coding. And I had the opportunity to work for PAX. So I worked there for a couple of years on their marketing team before I stumbled upon Proletariat. And I've had the great pleasure of helping them launch Celebrate. So I do a lot of things from developing, shooting, and editing trailers to tracking analytics for ads that we run and developing strategies for the company's publishing plans. I will pass it off to Stef.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stef. I'm an associate product manager at Proletariat. I went to college for mechanical engineering for a little while, realized that it wasn't really for me, tried to transition very briefly into coding, also didn't really stick, and then kind of found my passion in human-computer interaction and user experience research type stuff, and got a degree in information science. But along the way, also got a game design minor because I could, and the game design classes fulfilled part of the curriculum I needed to graduate. So I did those, really enjoyed it, and kind of knew leaving college that I wanted to go into games. I briefly did a stint at Microsoft working in the consumer fraud prevention department, which was a role I was completely randomly assigned. They just hire a bunch of college kids and they give them miscellaneous roles. And that was the one I was given. On the job, I learned a lot of data analytics and found out that I really enjoyed doing that. I love a good graph, and realized that product management in games is just making good graphs, but for games. And I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. So I went to the Game Developers Conference in 2019 and met one of the engineers at Proletariat who had recently started there. And we became friends at GDC and stayed in touch, mostly over Dungeons and Dragons. Let's talk Dungeons and Dragons. And then eventually he sent me a job posting, and I started Proletariat about 10 months ago and have had an amazing time since. Popcorn Jennie.
wasn't ready. I totally thought you were going to call in Tori. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennie Hsu. I am a producer here. I got started at Proletariat over 5 years ago. I actually came in to be a player support contract position. I was only supposed to be here for 8 weeks. I had always wanted to get into the industry, never had found a way. Originally went to school for computer science, realized I did not love that. Went and did a stint in South Korea teaching English for 2 years after I graduated from college. Came back, met a friend that happened to know the CEO of our company, was like, hey, they're looking for someone that, to come in and handle support tickets. I'll put you in touch. 5 years later, I'm still here, thankfully. But I spent the first 2 years at Proletariat in community management. So handling social media, community, engaging with our players, content creators. And then 3 years ago, at the start of Spellbreak production, I transitioned over into this producer role. And for folks that maybe are not sure what a producer does in the games industry, it's very similar to project management in other areas of tech. So I'm really responsible for working with Stef and other product owners to ensure that I'm creating, a timeline, a roadmap, resourcing it to ensure that we're hitting all of the visions that product has for our project within the time that's allotted to us. Tori?
Obviously. I'm Tori. I'm she, her, by the way. I did put in my name because I came in a little late. I was a little flustered. But yes, I am the writer / narrative designer / content designer for Proletariat and working on Spellbreak right now. How I started in the industry. So I actually started as an English teacher. That's what I went to college for, and that's what I did for 2 years after college. I taught high school students mostly. I taught secondary English. I decided that wasn't for me after doing that for 2 years. So then I had a friend recommend me for ZeniMax Online Studios QA, quality assurance tester. So I did that. And then during my time at ZeniMax, a writing position opened up. So I was able to apply and get that, which is really lucky. Just circumstances, allowed me to get into the role I have today for sure. At ZeniMax, I worked on Elder Scrolls Online, which is an MMORPG. I was very heavy into the writing role of that side, but I did do some narrative design work as well. Once I left ZeniMax, I came into Proletariat for a much more heavy narrative design and content design role. It's almost like those things reversed with how much I do. So mostly I do a lot of narrative and content design for the team. I actually work with everybody in this chat pretty closely. I give names for Becca's emotes. I've written trailers for Cate. Jennie bugs me about naming clothing and cosmetics and giving them little descriptions because, writing and also coming up with some ideas that are narratively themed. And Stef not only have helped me playtest something very exciting, which I cannot talk about. So that was a great experience, but also is a product owner for something I'll be working on very closely with in the future. So it's really exciting to be a narrative designer in the games industry because you get to work with pretty much everybody in your studio. So that's kind of my experience.
So great to get a sense of how you all work together. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to launch into the questions. I see that we're already getting questions in the Q&A, so we'll try to get through everything. And I will say for each of the questions, you don't all have to answer. I think if something jumps out that you'd really like to answer, we'd love to hear it. So the first question that we got was, I'd like to know about your recommendations to get kids, girls especially, interested in coding, animation, art, etc. How did you get started and what kept your focus? And do you have any tips for maybe parents or caregivers out there?
So I'll actually be right back in just a few minutes, but I'm sure everybody else will answer questions.
So my mother was extremely artistic growing up. She was a graphic artist, and she always just, we always had things around the house to draw. There was always musical instruments around, and she always really cultivated an environment of creating. So I think that's really, really important for kids, is to let them have the tools available to explore and figure out what it is that they're passionate about, rather than being, pigeonholing them into one field of art, because there's so many different directions. If you just look at the plethora of talent, the studio, so many people come from different backgrounds. I had no idea Tori was a teacher. That's cool to know. And now she's creating worlds, right? So I think it's just a matter of having open communication with kids and just making those tools available and letting them play and explore.
Yeah, I'll give a +1 to the availability, especially. I had an interesting, I call it interesting. I don't think it's particularly unique, but I think it's a funny story in that the reason video games entered my household was because my brother refused to read. And my dad was like, what can I give this child to like make him read? And he was like, what if I gave him a video game that was really text heavy, which happened to be Japanese role-playing games, JRPGs. Yeah, I see a comment that says I game to read too. Yes, yeah. So video games sort of like became a household thing because that was how they forced my brother to learn how to read. Funny enough, he works at Proletariat now too with us. So you can, so everyone who knows him, you can make fun of him for that. And once video games were there and they were present, I think my parents did a really great thing in that once they noticed that there was something I was interested in too, instead of kind of just letting me piggyback off of my brother, like I know a lot of people did, especially a lot of women. There are a lot of women who get into gaming because, you know, their brothers were into it because it was like a boys thing, especially when I was growing up. My parents kind of just encouraged me independently to explore what I wanted to do, kind of like what Cate was saying. In that, like, instead of just giving me his hand-me-downs or saying like, oh, you can share with your brother, the first Christmas present I remember getting was a Game Boy Color with Pokemon Yellow in it, because my parents saw me just like trying to steal my brother's Game Boy to play Pokemon Blue, and they're like, maybe we should just get her own game system. And that was a constant for us growing up. Anytime a new game system came out that was not like a console, that was like a handheld thing, they would buy one for me and one for my brother. And I think that was really, really essential in, you know, encouraging me to independently be like, oh, I like games. It's not that I'm like, you know, stealing my brother's systems or consoles or playing them when he's not playing. I have a means of exploring this hobby myself and having autonomy over like the games that I own versus my brother. We would still even have arguments over like whose game is whose once both of us moved out of the house, like whose ownership over these games that our parents bought us was constantly like a thing, because there were games that both of us independently wanted. And I think that really contributed to me like knowing that games were not just a hobby, but something that I was like really passionate about getting into later in life as a career.
Yeah, if I could just jump in here, I would say like trying to assess what games like your child, or you know, whatever child you're trying to encourage, or maybe see if they want to get into something like games, like what kind of games they're interested in. Like for example, my grandpa, this is like a sob story that I say a lot. My grandpa got me an Xbox when I asked for a GameCube, and you can't play Ocarina of Time on an Xbox. So I played Harry Potter games for the next couple years. It's like a story, and I was upset with him. He's like, the guy at the game store said this one was better. I'm like, but I want to play Pokemon Tournament. Like I don't want to play Call of Duty. Come on, grandpa. So like being like, oh, do they like Animal Crossing is a pretty popular game, or maybe they want to play Call of Duty, maybe they want to play the new Halo. Like just like assessing out what they like, because if you buy your a child a Switch over like an Xbox or a PlayStation, like the types of games that you can play are pretty big. And also just letting them know that there is more than one type of game. There seems to be this prevalent thing on the internet that like, you know, Fortnite is really popular, like games that you shoot people, but like just knowing that there's other types of games out there, like Harvest Moon is a good example, Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing, but also like really weird indie games, visual novels, things like that. Like just showing like the breadth, because like, you know, a child might not be interested in something that they think is this is what all video games is, but then you show them something like Breath of the Wild or something like that. Maybe they'll be more. Maybe I shouldn't say that as somebody who makes a battle royale, because 100%, if your kid wants to play Spellbreak, it's number one. But like, you know, just like sometimes I think children don't know just how, like I certainly didn't, how like expansive games are, especially nowadays. So like, you know, seeing what they're interested in is also, I think, a really big first step.
Awesome advice. Yeah, as a kid, having the older brother who had the game systems and was the area of focus, I was pretty sure that Zelda was like the only game out there. It was only later that I realized that there were other options. Awesome. Okay, so moving on to the next question. This was another one that came in from a submission. It says, are you treated differently by men outside of your office when people find out where you work? I imagine you're likely to be viewed as cooler than someone in a more traditionally female professional role or in a different type of tech role. Do you feel pressure to live up to a cool girl vibe? And are there cliques within the gaming industry?
I could speak to that. I definitely get that. My experience is I kind of get that from both men and women, where, you know, you say you work in games and then people are just automatically like, oh, that's so cool. Like your job must be so much fun. Like, what do you do? And then when you say you're an animator, they're like, oh, like Pixar. And you're like, yeah, it is cool, but it's also, you know, it's a job as well. You know, you have your grindy days and your awesome days, just like any other job. I do feel like, I don't know. I don't want to monopolize the question, so I'll kick it off to anybody else. But that's the response I usually get for that one.
I feel like chiming in here. So kind of going along with what you were saying, Becca, it's like there's this idea sometimes that people are like, oh, you work in games, all you do all day is play video games and you must have the most fun job ever. And it's like, no, like we also work very hard, as anyone does in any industry. Like work is work, and you know, sometimes there's long hours and sometimes there's stress, but it is very creatively driven, and the teams tend to be really passionate, so that's super fun. I think one of the things that I've hit, not only just working in the industry but just being a girl gamer in general, is gatekeepers who are just kind of like, oh, like you're a girl, you play games, like, oh, well, what kind of games do you play? And it's like people judging, you know, if the games I play are cool enough, or if I'm like a true gamer, or if I'm just like, I don't know, playing Candy Crush on my phone, which, like, no judgment, games are games, they're fun, people go to them for all kinds of different reasons. But I feel like that was something I hit a lot when I was younger, because, you know, growing up, there weren't as many online games as there are now. I feel like there was pretty much like, there was World of Warcraft and things like that. But most of the time you were either playing couch co-op with, you know, whoever was kind of hanging out at your house with you, or you play alone. So it was a very solo experience for me for a long time. And it was kind of isolating because we didn't have that online component. And, you know, none of my girlfriends played games. And so there was, you know, always this sort of sadness for this hobby was something I was extremely passionate about, but I didn't get to share it. And that's something I love now, is you see how woven games are just in the fabric of everyone's lives. It's like there's YouTube and there's Twitch where people are watching people play games. You see kids playing games, people of all different ages. Like I used to play Words with Friends with my grandmother every day. And so just that sort of accessibility, everybody likes to have fun. And so I find that, you know, less and less that I'm hitting, you know, people sort of being biased about what I do or the fact that I like games, because I think it is so prevalent in culture now.
I think I got this more as like a college student gamer girl, than like an industry professional, but maybe just because like I have friendship groups and I mostly hang out with either my like friends from, you know, or my friendship groups, or I hang out with my coworkers who understand like we're all in the industry. But like, yeah, I think that there's also this thing where like if you're like especially women coming into like gaming group, like I used to be part of my game club in college, right? And like they would always play Smash Brothers. They would always play Smash Brothers. And if you wanted to play, they're like, oh, okay. And then they would beat you up really fast, and nobody wanted to explain how to play Smash Brothers. They just wanted you to like lose fast as possible so you could get out of there. Same with like fighting games, same with like a lot of like multiplayer shooting games. Like there's definitely this wall and this barrier that you felt between them and you. Whereas like every time I played like any games with a group of a woman, or honestly like LGBTQ plus friends that I've had as well, like groups that like there's always so welcoming of like, yeah, let me teach you how to play, like let me teach you these combos and let me tell you what to do. It's like this much more like inclusive kind of feel that you're like, oh yeah, I'm like a part of this group. And I would definitely like recommend like, you know, I know it's tough and it's really hard to like put yourself into a very male dominated space, which the games industry and gaming in general can feel like at times. But I definitely say like joining discords of other groups that are more diverse can be really good. I know there's like, for example, the Wholesome Games Discord, which I am in, but I don't usually use Discord groups that much because I'm just so busy. But like that's a great Discord group because they talk about more wholesome games like Harvest Moon and things like that. But I felt like it was a very welcoming space where people wanted to like enjoy each other's company and things like that. Or within a gaming group, like trying to find maybe one person or a group of people who will kind of teach you those like how to play Smash Brothers, or will kind of be more understanding of things. And my hope is that like this was admittedly 6 years ago when I was in college, but like now I'm hoping that those groups are just more diverse within college campuses and things like that. But just like making sure that you're finding people who you can feel welcomed with, whether that's online or not.
That's really awesome advice. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so getting into the career stuff a little bit. So another question that came in was, is it possible to switch careers and get into this business without experience specifically in gaming? I know some of you touched on that in your intros and bios, but if anybody wants to go a little deeper and really how to take that first step, I think that'd be really helpful for some people.
An interesting thing about this is that as someone who is like much newer to the industry, I've been in it for less than a year. It was really interesting once I became interested in moving into games, hearing how much people in games value the perspectives of people who are not the stereotypical gamer. The product team at Proletariat very specifically hired me and our other associate producer because we had never worked in games. Because it was like, okay, like how do we diversify this team in terms of perspective of like, okay, we've got these people who worked in games for a really long time, but let's get some fresh perspectives in here of people who like aren't, haven't seen what success looks like and can just kind of like come up with new, fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. And that seems to kind of be a constant where I'm in a lot of interviews nowadays because we're hiring so rapidly. And there's so many people who come to these final interviews and they have no experience, like specifically working in gaming, but they have skills that are clearly directly transferable. And they have a passion for just working at Proletariat. And that's really what makes it. Like, we have never discounted someone in an interview if they come in and they're like, oh, I've never worked in games. If anything, we're just like, wow, that's awesome. Like, you can bring this really cool perspective of working in insurance. That's random. That's not an actual an actual example, but like, wow, you did like some really cool stuff while you worked in insurance that we could see like contributing to this. And it's a new like diverse perspective on the work that you're doing. And that's super cool. So I think like before I got into the industry, I was very discouraged because I was like, how am I going to get in when I don't have specific games experience? Like, I need to go and like do a million side projects and do all the game jams I can, which is like a great way to build experience and build a portfolio depending on the type of thing that you're getting into. But also like never discount. I think for me, it was like I completely discounted the power of going in and just saying like, here are my skills I have and how they are transferable. They are not games related, but like everyone could use a good graph, right? And then like how does that relate? Like, here's an example of the graphs I could give you. I'll just talk about graphs every time. I love graphs. But yeah, like it's pretty much like kind of what I started doing with people, and apparently it worked for some of them. So yeah.
Step in as somebody who came from a teaching background and moving to a writing background. Obviously, like transferable skills. I did like concentration of creative writing when I was in college because I was interested in that. So like that helped my writing skills. But like a lot of the times, like I feel like they're more interested in like your skill set and like how you can bring that skill set to the table than like just like pure experience. Like, I obviously I do think that industry experience is still important, especially if you're looking for like a senior role. But if you're like looking for that intro kind of role, I think just like kind of stating like where your experiences are strongly suited to like what you're trying to do, especially if you show a passion for like what that thing is. Like if you want to get into like, let's say animation, like Becca, right? Like showing a passion about like, how animation plays into like movies versus animated movies. Well, I guess it would be animated movies if you're talking about animation. Movies versus games versus like maybe television shows. Like showing that interest and talking about it can also really like, show like what you're passionate about. But I do also know I know people in the games industry who don't even really play games. Like that's just not a passion of theirs, but they're highly skilled at what they do. I know like art leads who like don't have a passion for games. Like they don't post about it, they don't really talk about it, they have other passions and hobbies, but they came really highly skilled, and that was what was important, and they're skilled and they do their job like really great. But I will say, like, truthfully, a passion for games is always going to be a plus, just because that's the industry we're in and things like that. But I'll say that bringing what your skill points are and things like that is also really important, and just like kind of getting your foot in the door however you can is also, I would say, an important role too. Like most people in like something like QA or customer service also generally don't have a gaming background. Like there's lots of roles where like the majority of people are coming into the industry that way. Not to say that QA isn't a viable, like 100% like a viable thing that you can do with your industry, like in the industry forever. Like I know QA leads and QA directors who are like highly skilled at what they do, and QA testers, of course, who enjoy that role and that's what they want to do. But like there are a lot of industry roles that they just don't really consider like background experience a necessary thing, and they're more just looking for passionate people who they can depend upon and trust, and maybe have some skills within that area.
To piggyback on that, I'm also involved in a lot of our interviews nowadays, just because, like Steph said before, we're hiring so many new folks. We're seeing a lot of folks that are applying from outside of the industry, and they have very important skill sets, especially on the sides of, and I think it's a little bit different on the tech side. We've definitely hired engineers that don't have Unreal experience, which is the engine that we're currently working in, but they pass their tech test, and folks are generally very eager to coach up new team members and be like, okay, like how can we leverage the skill set that you have? Someone that is able to communicate effectively with their team, someone that's able to collaborate is always going to be someone that we want to add. And so if you find someone that has like a very, very interesting cover letter that's like, hey, I've never done this thing, but here are all of the skills that I have that apply. And I'm super passionate about your company, not just games in general, but like your company, your game. This is why, like that, I feel like we see a lot of people come in the door that it's just like, hey, like maybe they're not the perfect fit on their resume, but they showed so much like personality and passion and spunk in their cover letter that we want to talk to them and see if there's, a way that we can and find a fit within our team. So we see that happen a lot, I would say. And for me, I didn't start in the industry. Proletariat hired me again at a contract role, but I worked really well with the team. So I've been around now for a few years, and they were able to leverage me into different roles when there was no longer really a spot within the community team. We were sunsetting previous games, started to we were in pre-production for Spellbreak, but there's really not a community that early on. And it's like, they were able to move me over just because I picked up these skill sets working for them along the way. So, it's never too late to make a big change if it's something that you're really actually passionate about.
That is such great advice, and I think applicable to many careers, right? I mean, I think you hear a lot of people who want to do a career change and are intimidated to break into something new. And I think you're right. I think passion, interest, and curiosity goes a really long way. Thank you. All right, so this is a little more topical of a question that came in, but I think it's a really good one. After the Gamergate situation and with incels, etc., I have really avoided online gaming entirely. Are things getting better? And, a side question to that was, where does a woman gamer go online that is safe? So if anybody wants to touch on one or the other or both.
So I play a lot of online games with friends, randos. I'm all over the place with it. It's a tricky question because how do you define safe in that space, right? There's always going to be jerks. I wouldn't recommend avoidance as the solution. I think it's taking up space, take up more space. Get out there, just mute people if they're jerks. I've seen so many people come to my defense. Like, I don't need someone to defend me, but there are really good people out there, and I've made really good friends because they see people being jerks. So in that sense, yeah, it's probably getting better, especially as communities get larger and more people are accepting gaming as a more mainstream thing. It used to be, 10, 15 years ago that it was like a nerdy hobby, and now everyone has some form of gaming that they do, right? Whether it's the Words with Friends with your grandparents or, Animal Crossing or whatever it is. But yeah, that's a tricky thing. I think that it's a matter of you got to have a thick skin to some degree because, if it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. They're going to make fun of you because you're a woman or LGBTQ+, or they're going to make fun of that guy because he's sweaty and trying too hard. So it's just jerks. Like, it doesn't really matter. That's how they're getting their fun. Just mute them, I
think it's
So I feel
also.
like oh, sorry.
Go for it. No, Jenny, go for it.
Stef, I already turned my mic off. You go first.
Damn it. Yeah, I think just to add to that too, I think there's this big push recently, not as big as many would like it to be. I personally am on the camp of that many, for a lot more accessibility in games in general for people who physically are unable to use voice chat or use text chat or any of those types of things. But the side result of that sort of push is that there are more ways to communicate with people in games without needing to use things like voice chat than ever now. So that mute button, it exists on one side, but also there are plenty of people that enter games just opting not to use voice chat at all. And because of how large the communities of these people are, it doesn't necessarily out you as a woman or anything like that at this point, because so many people who for one reason or another have just been I'm not using voice chat in this game at all. And a lot of people have naturally just sort of adapted to it. So I found a lot of situations where in situations where there are some people that are in online matchmaking using voice chat, but a lot of people opting not to, and people just being accommodating by using ping systems, because games have created really good ping systems now to accommodate that, and also text chat instead, and people checking when they hop on, people saying hey, who here's got a mic, instead of just assuming that people are going to be on. And that gives you sort of an opening and an opportunity to just say to either say out loud and kind of gauge oh yeah, I've got a mic, and see how people react, or to just type in chat hey, I'm not using a mic, can we use text chat? And people are surprisingly more than happy to do that sort of thing.
There's also, games now, you have the ability to block people. I wish it was as easy as just being oh, everyone's nice now. And unfortunately, that's not always the case, especially when you're playing an online game. So there's a lot of options to be able to block people. Like Stef said, there's more accessibility options that you can communicate with players in game without actually needing to have your voice on. But also I'm seeing a lot of this in chat, that there's a lot of Discords out there that are really positive. And you'll see as well a lot of Twitch content creator communities where people, are tuning in every single day, and they start to feel like a family, where they're, the streamer, the personality that's on the stream is this is how I want my community to be. And they're very quick to shut down anyone who breaches that sort of social contract. And you see that in these Discords. This is something that I learned when I was in community management. If you are very explicit in what you expect your community to act like and how you want them to treat others, you can then step away, because you can never be online 24/7. But if you set that example for people and then you step away, then your community will actually police itself. And so I think that Proletariat has done a great job of that. Spellbreak, of course, we have incidents here and there, but we're very quick to block anybody who's, sort of breaching. I think our approach is, we always say, like, no isms, no sexism, no racism, no ageism, all of that. It's just like, we are not tolerant of that. And so if you exhibit any signs of that, you're out. Sorry, that's not the kind of people that we want in our community. So I think there's a lot of pockets on the internet where you'll find people who sort of have the same approach to things. I don't have any, like, off the top of my head, but it sounds like a lot of folks in chat are part of some really positive Discord, so they might be able to point you in a good direction.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, not just as a gamer are you, like, we're expecting you to kind of figure this out, but also as an industry, we are trying to figure this out as well. Steph said some really cool stuff about, like, ping systems, making voice chat not really something that we need to have, but, like, I attended the summer GDC conference. There was an entire talk just on how do we build community structures that are more positive, like rule sets and things like that, like Jenny talked about, but also how do we design games so that it creates a positive environment? How do we block the ways that people are using to troll or to, be negative? And how do we create systems, like, design wise, that makes, like, a more positive experience? So, like, this is something that we as an industry are also trying to tackle as well. Not just you just don't put it on the gamers, because if you go into our game and you have a negative experience, you probably don't want to play our game. This is something that the industry is also very interested in and trying to kind of solve for.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So now I think we have some time to get into questions that came up in the Q&A. So the first question there is, has your view of games changed since joining the gaming industry?
I feel like, if I may begin, I feel like I both have more patience with games and less patience with games, if that makes sense. Like, now when I play a game, I'm like, I know what went into this. Like, I have an idea of how much work this thing took. That must have been so hard. And so if something's not perfect, I'm like, I get you. I get it. And then also at the same time, sometimes, this isn't all the time, but sometimes, you'll end a day of work and just be like, I do not want to look at video games. I don't want to look at a screen. I want to go outside in nature or something and get away from it all. So I don't know. It's a weird dichotomy there.
I definitely agree about you analyzed your experience with games with a little bit more compassion and understanding. I feel like as a kid, I would play something, this game sucks, like throw it to the side. And it's like, now I would never say that about a game ever. Because it's like, that's what you say if you've never made anything. Like, to understand what goes into something, it's like, maybe it's just not for you, but you can look at just how monstrous of a task just getting the thing to work is. And that's amazing. Like, every game is amazing in that sense,
I think I more appreciate, like, how a game is made and, like, thinking about that instead of, like, what my experience with that game is. Like I was playing a game with my friends. I'll say it was Crystal Chronicles. Love that game. And we were talking about, like, our issues with it, and I was trying to explain, like, oh, maybe this was something that they decided because of this issue, or maybe it was an engineering, like, a thing, and maybe, and like trying to explain, like, the, like, studio's thought process why they made these decisions. And my friends were just not about it. They were just like, no, I don't like this. That's all I care about. And there's it's your gamer brain and it's your industry brain. And honestly, I think that gamer is like, there's like a great a quote from I remember from a design talk. I forget who said it though. It was somebody who works for Magic the Gathering, but it was just that gamers are the best people to give you feedback, whereas, like, they are some of the worst solution people that you can talk. Like, they are the best at saying what's wrong, but they are not the best at saying what the solution is for that, because they just don't really know what goes into a game and how that solution works. So, like, 100% whenever I hear feedback from any game, I know that's valid and I know that's totally 100% correct. But now when I hear, why didn't they just do this instead? It's so obvious. I'm like, there's 1,000 reasons why. There's scoping, there's time, there's iteration, there's conflicting leadership things. There's, like, they tried one thing, it didn't work. This was plan B. They had to fall back. And, like, I talk about that, but, like, they just care that they don't like the thing. And sometimes I think that is like a disconnect between me and my friends when we play games and things like that. That I now is my like industry brain that pops out whenever I see these kind of issues.
I go on rants about the background of games. I think in total agreement with both of those things, but also I spend like way more money on games now, especially indie games. Before I was definitely one of those people that was like, I'll wait until it's on super sale and then I'll get it. But now when a cool thing comes out, regardless of whether or not I know I'm going to play it, I'm just like, I'm going to support those developers and I just grab the game. Or like, I'm definitely more willing to participate in like microtransactions for smaller games. Like I play the game like twice and I'm like, that deserves me buying a cosmetic. They deserve it from me. So I'm definitely way more willing to support indie developers, especially now knowing what goes into it from the other side.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question that came in tonight was, how was making the switch to working remotely for your studio? What logistical challenges, if any, did you face? Uh-oh, Tori and Jenny are laughing. Okay.
Physical or action, should I say? I work for the world building team. That's technically my pod that I work with, and oh my god, those poor guys, they had so much work on their hands, so we decided to go and switch because there's just I don't think this is like a secret or anything, but basically on PlayStation, the graphics and the performance, like you can make those much higher because it's a stronger machine, whereas a Nintendo Switch honestly has some of the same tech as a cell phone. You'd find that they're actually pretty similar. The Switch is great, by the way. Absolutely love it, but it is a handheld device. You know, it's smaller. It's less of a powerhouse. So, like, you know, just like taking that into consideration, and there's just so much work. I couldn't even begin to describe the amount of work that our world team had to make the actual world of the game work on Switch. You know, from not only like just getting like technical performance stuff, but like design choices and things like that. So it would look good both on like super high end PlayStation or PC performance, but also on like a handheld Switch. So there is a lot. There is a lot that went into it.
I have a question. Was the question about switching to remote work or about getting it to work on the Nintendo Switch?
I misheard. I'm sorry.
Both were
Gamers got game.
I heard it, my brain was just like, oh my god, it was such a hard thing to oh.
Both were a
Jenny also 100% just corrected. Sorry.
Totally correct, Tori.
But, okay, I
Crazy.
won't answer the other question then. I'm just gonna sit here and be quiet.
Well, we are totally scarred from all of the work that had to go into getting it onto the Switch. But also, it was a really tough transition to working remotely, especially because we've actually expanded a lot as a team since we went remote back in the middle of March. And so the biggest thing is that, like, as a team, you know, you see actually a lot of games right now that, because of the pandemic and because of the switch to working remote, a lot of launch dates are getting pushed back, some substantially. And we didn't have to push our launch date back. Like, I feel like our team actually handled the transition very smoothly. And I think a lot of that goes into because of our people operations team. Like, they are absolutely stellar. They figured out really quick all of the tech solutions that we need to put in place to make sure that people were connected and able to work from home, and then following up with folks to make sure as well that their home workspace is comfortable and that they have the monitors that they need. And if they don't, making sure that they ship it to them and all of that. But on top of that, I think the team in general was just like, everyone was so excited to work on this project and wanted to make sure that we landed it within the time frame that we had, that people really went above and beyond just to make processes that would work in this new remote world. So we had a Discord previously which we still do, which is for our game, but we made a separate work from home Discord so that folks could still have, while you might not have that face-to-face interaction, you can't, see someone in the lunchroom and be like, oh, look, want to have a coffee or walk by someone's desk, but we have voice channels that you can sit in so that, people can kind of chit chat throughout the day. We have a lot of face-to-face meetings now just to make sure that people actually see who's on the other side of the screen. And just making sure that communication stayed very clear and very smooth. And that's a big part of what the production team and also the product team had to do. So there were definitely some challenges there, but everybody was great about just making sure that like, hey, we know that we need to succeed and we don't have a lot of time to do it. So let's all just band together and figure out the best way to make this kind of shitty situation honestly work.
Full of stuff at the office. Like,
Stuff never to be
like
seen.
I miss my Starbucks cup. Maybe I should venture downtown to get that.
I left my slippers there. I like to work in slippers instead of shoes.
I was just thinking that the other day. I was like, where are my slippers? I was like, I think they're at the office. Maybe I'll get them next year. I don't know.
Someday.
Abandoned things. It'll be like a treasure trove when you get back in there and see what's really there.
Yeah,
I
did have someone go back in and save all the plants. Someone said their plants are all dead. I can tell you the Proletariat plants were saved. I think by Mare, who was in chat. So thanks, Mare.
That's so nice. That's so nice to know. Some survivors. I think we have time for one or two more questions. We are coming to the end of our time. There's a ton of questions in here that are so great. But here's another one that came in tonight. How do you decide what game ideas you move forward with and what you don't? Do you still think about the games that are left on the cutting room floor?
At least speaking with how we make changes within Spellbreak, part of Proletariat's mission is to include the community in decisions and be transparent as much as possible. So a lot of decisions actually come from the community itself. Jennie was a part of the community management team for a long time, so I'm sure she could probably speak to it better than I could. I'm a little bit newer. But I know even now we have a constant ongoing feedback process, and we really truly take into consideration what players are saying. It's not just, fan service, and a lot of what you see in the game has had a hand from them in it.
I'll speak to the other side too, where part of my job is to suss out what sort of like community ideas and things are doable from like a feature and engineering perspective. And I can only speak to not necessarily like whole game ideas, but again, like smaller parts of Spellbreak, because I've only been here for a short period of time. But a lot of it is just like, what do we have time to do, and what do we think is going to fix the biggest issues with the game, whether those issues are identified by us, because like it's something that maybe we know about, but the players don't know a lot about, but we're like, we really got to get this in. Or if it's something that like is a huge issue with players and they're very vocal about it, and we're like, yeah, like this is a huge issue with the community, and a lot of our players are struggling with XYZ, like, and then figuring out like between those two things, which of these should we prioritize and which of these does end up being more important, because there are a lot of times when there are like very big things happening in the community that I think someone put in the chat before, something about Animal Crossing, and like what people were saying was like a small fix is not really a very small fix. And that's a thing that happens all the time, where people are like, oh, it'd be so easy for them to do this. And everyone at Proletariat on the other side is like, if only it were that easy. So a lot of what we have to do is constantly take those ideas, and just because ideas get left on the cutting room floor doesn't mean they're not good. It's usually just like a matter of time and prioritization. There are so many things that people internally and externally have said that like everyone pretty much unanimously can agree that's like, that's a super cool idea and really good and would be amazing if we got in the game. But that would also take 2 engineers worth of 3 months of development time. And like, we don't have that kind of time when we have all of this other stuff that we really want to get to. So like with a lot of those ideas, unfortunately, it never really actually comes down to like which of these ideas would be awesome and would be really cool, so much as like, especially at a studio our size, like what do we have the resources to physically do such that we can get content to our players, because yeah, theoretically we could do that, but then our players wouldn't see a single update to the game for a year, and that's also not good for other reasons.
Yeah, it's a constant balancing act, and I feel like often I'm in the position where I have to tell products like, no, sorry, you can't do this, or you can't do it within the time frame that you want it by. But there's always a shuffling around of like, okay, if it's something that folks feel is really going to be impactful, what do we need to cut to make that possible? So there are times where we might, cut some smaller things to make sure that we really have time to execute on this really juicy idea that we think is going to land super well with our target audience. Early on, because I'm not sure if the question was really about like, ideas that are getting into Spellbreak now or the actual like origin process. Having been around at the start of the project, I remember observing a lot of different prototypes that we were doing, and there were so many different directions that we could move in. We, I think we had like something like 4 or 5 different prototypes of projects that were not at all like Spellbreak. And what it really came down to, at least from what I observed in the team, was what were the most people passionate about? Like you could, of course, like you could always make a mobile game that basically like prints money, but it's not, necessarily the most fun thing to create or the most exciting thing for the players. And so there's a balance of being like, okay, how do we find a game idea that is financially viable for the company, but also fun and exciting for us to work on? Like we're a creative studio. We would rather create something that everyone feels really invested in instead of just, burning ourselves out on a project that doesn't excite us just to keep the doors open. So I feel like there's a real balancing act there. And I'm very glad that we ended up working on Spellbreak because, the games that we've worked on in the past were awesome, but they weren't really games that I personally would play in my free time, whereas I feel like Spellbreak is a game that I would play in my free time. So there is that balance where sometimes people are like, oh, it must be so fun to work in games. And it's like, even if you're a gamer, you're not always working on, the game that you want to make, or you're not always working on the most fun and exciting feature. Like a lot of times when you get later on in production, you're no longer, at that stage where you're sparking these big ideas. A lot of times it's like, okay, now it's time to do the less glamorous side of the work that still needs to get done to make this game possible. So yeah, there's a lot of balancing, and sometimes it's not so fun. And then it does pay off when you have those moments where it's just like everything sort of comes together and you have that experience in the game where you're like, oh, this is why we wanted to make this game.
Yeah, as somebody whose kind of job is to create narrative content for the game, there's a lot of things that other games do narratively that we just can't do as a battle royale. I have to consider that what is the gameplay of the game and what are we doing and what's the actions. So, for example, like having an NPC in the world who tells you go slay 5 rats for me, very common MMO kind of thing. I'm obviously simplifying, but I can't do that because you're like on constant threat of somebody coming and shooting you and like defeating you because this is a battle royale. It's a PvP, it's multiplayer. So like just kind of taking into like game design considerations, but also like Jennie said, scoping considerations like I have been told no by Jennie before or watch out, this thing that we might have thought was possible might not be possible now. I'm being like, okay, here's plan B, here's plan C, here's plan D, let's see what works out. Scoping's a huge part of it. Like I can give a pie in the sky, this is what the most awesome vision, if I had unlimited budget, if I had unlimited time, could be. And then there's the reality. And like a big part of working in the game industry is knowing the reality. If I want an animation and I chat with Becca and the other animators as well, and I say, this is my idea or this is what I need, is that possible, how big of a scope that is, and then I get Jennie in that conversation, can we get this into the game, the schedule, so that it can release in time for this patch. It's like a huge conversation whenever I want to do something. And so knowing our scope, knowing our budget, and that includes time, that includes people, that's not just money, things like that. And knowing like our game needs, our game design needs, our player needs, those are all things that have to come into consideration whenever I say like, I want to create this thing that will introduce narrative to the game. So like, when you're talking about the cutting room floor is we don't have time for it. Like that doesn't work for our game. Gameplay doesn't like it. Product thinks that it's something that the community won't really enjoy. Things like that. And just working with all your team members, it's like a super collaborative process. It's almost like you're taking like a art piece, and then everybody, all the teams are like cutting up and drawing on, and then adding and gluing more pieces to it, and you like create this weird, crazy like mural that like everybody created. you know? It's much more of like what's the name of the art pieces where you cut things up and you put a collage? A game is a collage. It's not one person's picture. It's a collage of everybody's needs and wants, and that's something really awesome about it. And yes, the floor is covered in lost and discarded ideas of the past, but it's a much more awesome product for the end for that. It's what that game needs to be, honestly.
Thank you. That was so awesome. This was such a juicy conversation. I feel like there are so many more questions, so we may have to do a part 2 at some point. But I just want to thank you, Becca, Cate, Jennie, Stef, and Tori. This was so wonderful. I think we can put in the comments or in the chat a link to Proletariat so people know where to get the new game and how they can access everything. I'm going to call Rachel back up, and she is going to do our raffle for the night. Thank you, Rachel. She just put the website in there. Perfect. Rachel, are you coming? People want their prizes. Okay.
Guys, can you see me? Can you hear me? Am I on really? Vienna's not responding, so I'm a little worried that Vienna's not seeing me, but everybody else is. So that's good. Other than their head, right? Not randomly. Okay, thanks, Jennie. Whew! My computer is having the Mondays. It is burnt out. It has fatigue. It has COVID fatigue. It has civil unrest fatigue. It has all the fatigue. See, and I guess Vienna's computer has had the same problem. So thank you so much. Y'all are incredible. I want you to know that even though I had trouble getting on, I could hear and watch everything. So really, yeah, no, Vienna's frozen. Awesome. We're going to buy new computers for everyone at the company. In fact, fun fact, Felicia and I were just chatting about how maybe we just get desktops since we don't need to be mobile anymore. We could just sit at home. But thank you. So we have raffle prizes. So proletariats, you are welcome to stay on camera or you can peace out. Either way, your choice. And I'll tell you how this works. So what I'm going to do is I use random.org. I downloaded everyone who signed up. I'm going to do 4 $25 gift cards to Etsy. Pro tip, do not type in gaming for Etsy. You will get at least one bad product that is very disturbing. But the other ones are good. Now I know I've piqued all of your interest, and now you guys want to do it. So I get it, but just trust me on this. You'll thank me. So let's get this party started. I actually know who all 3 winners are because I did random.org and I got all 3. And one of them is on this screen right here. So I'm going to announce you first, and that is Stef. Stef, you got it. But I will say that you were second on the list. So I will get you an Etsy prize. And I am really happy to share with you all that first on this list is the one and only Susie Dow. which is very exciting. And my cats are like also having a case of the Mondays. And then we have third is Dana Levin, who, if you're still here, come and say hi and OMGs and all that good stuff. Come on, I'll hook you up and send you. And what will happen is I'll send you you'll get a nice little gift card, so that'll be great. And then final person is just as Laurel, which I love. I don't know if anyone else watches RuPaul's Drag Race, but there was a person on named Jan, and she was just Jan. So I feel like this is just Laurel. So I don't know who Laurel is, but I see you on there, so that is great. So thank you so much to Proletariat. Y'all are amazing, and Vienna's right. This was a really rich conversation. There's still so much to cover, and I definitely would love to do this again in all the ways. And so this will be recorded. This has been recorded. We'll get this up on YouTube, so y'all be famous. And that's why Vienna put on lipstick, because she knew. And we'll have another 25 minutes or so to do some more networking. Definitely talk to the folks at Proletariat. And we just really quickly, we have a very special event next week. Is it next week, October 7th, a week and a half-ish? VP debate also using this platform. And also it'll be some virtual letter writing, and we are just going to put all that positive energy out there to vote, because it's important, like really important. Okay, I think that is all for me. Vienna, anything else you want to add? You good?
I think I'm good, but if anybody hasn't registered to vote yet, you should do that. If you need help, hit me up directly. I'm happy to help.
Aw.
Yeah. Check your registration.
Yeah, love. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. This was awesome.
See you all in the cloud.
Thank you.